this exciting episode, the thrill is gone. As for that song, goodbye, Joni Baker. You sing too long. Fortunately, David Gideon's here to keep that torch aflame when the torch singer takes a dive. It's Perry Mason, Season 5, Episode 3, The Case of the Missing Melody. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy. My purpose? Pretty simple. Provide an audio companion to every episode of television's greatest legal drama, Perry Mason. Each episode, we give you a summary of the plot. We even compare plots with the Earl Stanley Gardner novel, if the episode was an adaptation. We give you a little trivia, reveal the episode's theme, and then revel in a Perry proverb. That's a pearl of wisdom from the man himself. Before heading to the water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can discuss the ins and outs of our fave legal cruise adventures. But first, say it with me, to the law library. In this trip to the law library, we discover what Perry's legal training looks like. Intrepid law student and acquitted murder defendant David Gideon has come to Perry to help him continue his legal education. This time around, we only get the stern beatdown Perry delivers to young David.
I'm sorry you took the time to write a brief, David. In my opinion, this is a perfect case of caveat emptor. Your theoretical client would have no reason to sue anyone but himself.
Our law library question: what kind of legal conundrum could have resulted in David's poorly thought out brief? And what would David's brief have included? A hypothetical scenario then. A jazz pianist, let's call him Eddie, purchases a vintage Steinway from a private citizen, the better to bolster his recording and touring career with. The seller advertised the piano as being in excellent condition, but after Eddie brings it to a few performances, he discovers that several keys stick. The sound quality is spotty, especially on his hit song, The Thrill Is Gone. And Eddie wants to sue the seller for misrepresentation and the costs associated with repairing or replacing the instrument. In short, we're in Judge Judy small claims court land. Great. Now what, pray tell, would David's faulty brief have said? My supposition, it's something like, the seller is liable for misrepresentation and breach of implied warranty. The seller explicitly advertised the piano as being in excellent condition, which would lead any reasonable buyer to believe that the piano was suitable for professional use without the need for immediate repairs. Under contract law, sellers are bound by their claims. Furthermore, if the seller was aware the piano would be used for professional concerts, there is an implied warranty that the piano would be suitable for this particular purpose. The pianist has suffered damages in the form of lost income, as well as the costs associated with repairs. The seller should be held liable for these damages. While we don't know what Judge Judy would say, we know what Judge Perry says. Caveat emptor, buyer beware. Now, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Missing Melody. We open on a wedding, babe. Perry and Della show up to the marriage of jazz pianist Eddie King and Polly Cortland, daughter of anti-gambling crusader Templeton Cortland. And guess what? David Gideon's in the crowd, too.
Della, you remember David Gideon, don't you?
Oh, yes, the eager young law student who was going to study in our office library.
Oh, I'm still going to in the street. But right now, I'm a friend of the bride's sister, Midge.
As Eddie's guitarist bassist and drummer usher the groovy bride down that jazzy aisle, something goes amiss.
No! Polly!
Eddie comes to Perry for help the same day.
Mr. Mason, you probably disapprove of me as a husband for Polly as much as Mr. Cortlandt does. But I don't know where else to turn.
Sit down, Eddie.
Thank you.
Polly talks things over with her sister Midge about just what went wrong. Midge is involved, apparently, as is Bongo, King's best man. Bongo? I wonder what kind of instrument that guy plays. Exposition?
How do you think those two pictures and a story in one of the confidential magazines would affect Dad? Noted reformer's sub-dep daughter registers at a Las Vegas motel. Famous jazz artist Bongo White.
We didn't stay there, Polly. I told you that. We only went there to freshen up. And as for registering together, well, it was just a joke.
So, composer George Sherwin has some blackmail material, huh? Polly gives Perry a cockamamie reason for the runaway bride routine.
You know, all those warnings about marrying jazz musicians. No home unless you call third-rate hotel bedrooms and smoky nightclubs home. Crazy mixed-up people for friends. It never quite got through to me until I saw Eddie's combo, the church, and they were playing the wedding march.
Perry gives the lie to her explanation, and Papa Cortlandt is left wondering what's up.
Her explanation sounds perfectly reasonable, just what I've been saying.
I happen to know that Eddie King nets close to $100,000 a year from recordings and playdates. He hardly ever appears in smoking nightclubs and never stays in third-rate hotels. As a matter of fact, he has a very comfortable home with a swimming pool in San Fernando Valley.
And what Polly said she just made up.
It would appear so.
Cue Eddie's band. This is all the same day, seemingly, as the wedding. Time goes slow when you're listening to torch numbers like this.
Love was grand when love was new. Birds were singing, skies were blue. Now it won't appeal to you. The thrill is gone.
Thanks, Joni Baker. You know where this is headed. George Sherwin is going to come down with a little case of murder. Somebody play a bebop version of Taps, but quick! Not surprisingly, Eddie is implicated. Polly's distraught, confides in Perry about her involvement, including her visit to Sherwin's apartment the night he was killed. Polly was trying to retrieve the compromising photos, left in a hurry, and left behind evidence like a broken heel and a cigarette butt. But with our pal David Gideon in tow, Perry puts Joni Baker at the scene to confuse a key witness.
Oh, there you are. Looking for something, lady? Maybe that's her. There she goes again. Same woman.
You're sure?
I'm positive.
Once we hit the trial, Joni Baker is a key witness again. First, because she implicates Perry in a scheme bent on confusing matters.
In a typical attempt to throw dust in the prosecution's eyes, Your Honor.
Not so, Your Honor. We were merely testing the recollection of a witness.
And then second, because she ends up coughing up the whole game when it turns out she's part of the missing evidence. You know, the titular missing melody. It seems George Sherwin was wont to record his apartment so as to ensure that no potential hit-making song idea went undocumented. And so it appears there was a tape of Sherwin's apartment on the night of the murder just floating out there. Not the one that was on our boy Eddie King, though. At least so says Trag.
You didn't look in the glove compartment?
No, I looked.
And found?
Oh, some old road maps, cleaning rag, oh yes. And a spool of tape from a recorder.
And you played that tape back on one of your police recorders?
Yes, I put it on one of our recorders.
Now, you heard what very well might be crucial evidence in this case, yet you failed to mention it in your report?
Well, there was nothing to mention.
Perry tracks the missing tape down to the apartment of vagabond bongo superstar Bongo. And there goes our alibi for our girl Joni. Now Joni has to confess that the thrill she is, how you say, gone on the stand. J'accuse!
Put that thing down, Joni. It might go off. Here, give it to me.
Stay away. Stay away, I tell you. I'm not sorry. 8 years.
In our denouement, Eddie and Polly tie the knot, and Perry has to offer some explanation for why the judge allowed him to play the tape in court. Surprise! Perry says it was the judge's idea. What?
Well, when I played the tape in his chambers, he pointed out it was inadmissible as evidence. In turn, I pointed out that if Joni had to be tried, the two negatives would be admissible as evidence.
Thus causing Templeton Courtland a good deal of unwarranted grief.
So the obvious thing was to use the tape to force a confession out of Joni.
But how did you actually get the judge to let you do that, Mr. Mason?
I didn't. He suggested the idea himself. After you.
Where's a good LA Chronicle journalist at when you need him? Somebody call Joe Davies for an expose, quick! I don't even know where to begin with this one in the law library. Now let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. A Della is a deep dive on an actor or actress who guest starred in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul for this episode involves Perry's outlandish brag for Eddie King. Do some sleuthing, Pauls. What's the likelihood that a nightclub jazz pianist, even if he's a band leader, is making 6 figs without having to brave a smoky nightclub, all while owning a house with a swimming pool in the San Fernando Valley? I would love to get the real estate figures on the SFV while you're at it. Thanks. Our Della for this episode, James Drury, Mr. Six-Finger Ivory Twinkler himself, Eddie King.
Stop trying to sound like a bongo player.
Here's 10 about Jim Drury. Number 1, Drury, born New York City, son of James Child Drury, Beatrice Crawford Drury. Papa was a New York University professor of marketing. Drury contracted polio at age 10. Number 2, Drury attended high schools in LA and was expelled from University High the day before graduation. But because of his dad, he was able to get into NYU and majored in drama. He took additional classes at UCLA to complete his degree and began acting in films at MGM. Number 3, signed a contract with MGM in '54, appeared in bit parts in films, moved over to 20th Century Fox later in the 50s, appeared in Love Me Tender and Bernadine. Number 4, in 1960, Drury appeared in roles in the series Bourbon Street Beat, The Rebel, and Wagon Train. Oh yeah, he was also in the Disney flick Pollyanna. Number 5, lest I forget, it was also 1960 he made his lone appearance on Perry Mason as Eddie King. Number 6, 1962, he hits the early Sam Peckinpah Western Ride the High Country, opposite Randolph Scott and Joel McCrea. In 1962, he also plays the title role in an episode of Wagon Train. Number 7, it was that year, 1962, that Drury landed the role that would make his career, the ranch foreman in The Virginian. Drury was put under a 7-year contract with Universal in '62. He was the front runner for the role, but still had to audition 3 separate times and was required to lose 30 pounds in 30 days to secure the part. Drury reported he based his performance on character elements from his maternal grandfather. Each episode of The Virginian lasted 90 minutes, which made for a grueling production schedule. Quote, "It was like doing a movie every week," Drury said in 2016. "We had 79 minutes and 30 seconds worth of film, which was as long as a lot of feature films that day. It was a very radical concept. I know Wagon Train went to 90 minutes for one season, and there may have been other attempts, but no one has ever been successful with 90 minutes for a Western series except The Virginian." Close quote. In 1991, Drury was inducted into the Hall of Great Western Performers at the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City, primarily because of this role. Number 8, other acting. 1993 was Captain Tom Price in the first 3 episodes of Walker, Texas Ranger. Drury also appeared in a cameo role in the 2000 TV movie The Virginian, starring Bill Pullman in the title role. Drury appeared in a number of films and other television programs: The Young Warriors, the TV cowboy reunion movie The Gambler Returns, The Luck of the Draw, and others. Number 9, since this episode shows Drury's character getting hitched, we'd be remiss not to mention Drury's own hitching history. February 7th, 1957, he marries Crystal Othones and fathered 2 sons, Timothy and James III. The couple divorced in 1964. 1968, he marries Phyllis Mitchell. That marriage ends in 1979. His third marriage was to Carl Ann Head in 1979. They were married for 40 years. Number 10, Drury died from natural causes in 2020, 12 days short of his 86th birthday. Our Perry for this episode involves our man's connection with the family of a moral crusader.
And you want me to find out?
Well, you're a friend of the family. You've known Polly since she was a little girl.
Yes, you have, Perry. And yet, he doesn't end up defending Polly as typical Perry plots would indicate. Instead, he defends the fiancée. How bizarre. Our theme for this episode is missing. Let us count the ways. Number 1, the missing copyright licenses that would get this episode up on Paramount Plus or Freevee. Number 2, the missing bouncer from the wedding that would have kept George Sherwin out of attending in the first place. Number 3, the missing Enid Markham, Cortland's secretary, from anything close to a reckoning, given her convo with George Sherwin early in the episode and her suspicious testimony during the trial. Number 4, the missing thrill. I hear it's gone. Number 5, the missing position of Papa Cortland. Okay, great. He's anti-gambling. What is he again? Is he a DA? Is he a special prosecutor? Is he a preacher? What's up? And number 6, the missing fate of Sister Midge. What doth she in the wake of Bongo Boy's bust-up? I smell a David Gideon romance. But something that's never missing, Perry's pitch-perfect solos in court. A ski-bop doo-wah be-da-ba-doo-bay. Cue those bongos. It's time to hear a Perry proverb. It's Perry's connection to Eddie King that provides this episode's Perry proverb. If you love jazz, what artists do you think would best establish your swingin' bona fides? Perry, show us the way.
Let me say now, I don't disapprove of you one bit. I happen to like jazz, everything from Jelly Roll Morton to you and Dave Brubeck.
Jelly Roll and Dave Brubeck, huh? Take 5, Perry. Now it's time to grab a swig from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Every time we visit the water cooler, we give you deleted scenes, 3 bits that didn't quite make the episode's final cut. Number 1, Eddie senses that the ceremony's too stiff. He goes with an all-bongo routine during the service. David Gideon provides running pedantic commentary. Churches now are going all percussion, particularly in the Mennonite and Coptic branches. Number 2, we get an extended solo in the middle of The Thrill Is Gone. famed Troubadour November 5th, 1960 cut of the song has all the Eddie King heads out there trading tapes of it for over 60 years. We await the YouTube video. That was the best ever version, man. It was better than the one from 1962 at the Whiskey A Go-Go. Bongo was on fire that night, man. Number 3, gambling impresario Jack Grabba sponsors the reception for the wedding, and by the end of the night, he and Temple Cortland are tight thanks to an especially suspenseful game of Uno. No cash involved, while Bongo slings some platters for the dance music. We had 2 Paul prompts from our last episode. First, what could the mysterious formula involve that caused such turmoil inside Amory Fallon's painting business? My guess, it involved latex paints. For most of the 19th and early 20th century, household paints were oil-based. But guess what they contained? Lead. Latex offered an alternative. This coincided with the do-it-yourself home improvement ethos of the middle of the 20th century in this country. And you probably know the irony here. Latex paints are lead-free, but not mercury-free. So would it be until the 21st century that someone developed a more environmentally safe latex paint? In any case, that's my guess as to what the formula involved. Our other prompt involved the magazine that Mrs. Temple is reading in bed, that enigmatically titled Love Stories. What's that about? April wrote in to say, quote, Love Story was an actual magazine. Women used to read about romantic relationships. Men probably hated it because it held them up to a high standard, close quote. John adds, the magazine was real, but it seemed to have stopped publishing issues in 1947. So either our girl was way behind in her reading, or it's a Perry creation. Given Mrs. Temple's characterization, John, I think either one is a possibility. It's entirely possible she's reading a magazine from 1947 and 1960. Thanks, Pauls. Now for a few listener letters. Aunt Mai wrote in, quote, I liked the last podcast. I didn't have time to watch the show on TV because I've been watching the Olympics. I like the Della information. She was an activist, close quote. Aunt Mai is talking about Leslie Parrish, our last Della star. Tim Cree wrote in to say, quote, after last weekend, I think your podcast might be more popular than Dabo's, close quote. Shows how long it's been since I've recorded. Since Clemson got waxed by Georgia, they've had 4 impressive wins. Thanks for the note, Tim. Finally, trivia maven Nancy wrote in, quote, just a preemptive note on the case of the missing melody because I've heard a million times Constance Towers can't sing. I saw her on Broadway in The King and I with Yul Brynner, and she has a beautiful voice. Here's a clip, close quote.
We've just been introduced. I do not know you well, but when the music started, something drew me to your side. So many men and girls.
As always, thanks so much, Nancy. I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a comment on the episode or the pod in general? Drop me a line at theperrypod@gmail.com. Join us next time as we go a-sailing with David Gideon, noted maritime law expert. We'll find out if Perry, a Navy vet, can truly sing, quote, my love, my life, and my lady is the sea in The Case of the Malicious Mariner. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep on walking that Park Avenue beat!